Well, in a week full of big news as it relates to quarterbacks, Texas got some good news, basically reaffirming probably what we all thought. Arch Manning will return to Texas in 2026. Of course, he was the highest profile quarterback coming into the season, had some ups, had some downs. However, he will return to Texas, looking to improve his draft stock going into next year and possibly also improving Texas' chance to make next year's college football playoff. Welcome to Southeast Sports Plus. I'm Gerhard Mathangani, joined by Patrick Walsh. And Patrick, I can't lie to you, when I got the notification on my phone,
I was about to fall asleep last night.
I was up for a while, but I saw breaking news, and then it was Arch Manning returning, and then I thought, journalistically speaking, and maybe because we're so tied to this conference, I think the breaking news would have been the other side had he been leaving. But of course, anytime that the Heisman Trophy favorite comes into the season with as much hype as he did, this has to be good news for Texas that he's not entering the transfer portal, but he is returning to Texas.
Yeah, and I honestly think no other team in America could probably pay the price to get Arch Manning to pull him away from Texas.
Yeah.
So good for Arch to realize that, hey, it's probably better for me to come back. Obviously, this year, as you mentioned, was not the year that he was hoping for or anybody thought the year he was going to have. We saw a little bit of action last year.
Right.
He only made one start against an SEC school, and that was Mississippi State, and he dropped 300 yards on him. So we're like, okay, let's pump the brakes a little bit because it's Mississippi State last year.
Right.
And we definitely had to pump the brakes after the Ohio State game, but it seemed like as the year went on, he slowly started to get into that groove and find that rhythm. And he, towards the end of the year, I would say he looks primed for a great year next year. I think we could say that with a little bit more confidence now that he has a full year as the starting quarterback in the SEC under his belt. But I mean, it feels like just a few months ago we were like, all right, is Caldwell going to start now next week? Because we didn't know what we were going to get out of Arch.
Yeah. One of the big things that Roger Wallace, our friend in Austin, Texas, would always tell us is that keep in mind, after last season, I know he is a Manning,
yes,
and I know he played well in the small sample size of games that we had a year ago, but he'd thrown 0 passes on the road. It's just as weird as it was. The games that he filled in for Quinn Ewers, they were home games.
All at DKR.
Yeah, all there at DKR, all home games, and it felt like the game plan was tailored to make his life a lot easier.
Yep.
So his first game is on the road as a starter at the Shoe against the defending national champion Ohio State. And, I mean, everything is hindsight 2020, but looking back at it, he was pumped up way too much. The hype was way too much for what he had done before.
Yeah.
And I think just because he was such a good high school player and he has all the tools and he's a Manning, I think that led to so much hype. Now I think that if he has the hype going into next year, it would be warranted because, as you said, he had games this year.
Look, I'll say this to you. Now that the regular season is done, I'm not going to count the postseason towards this stat because the postseason is a different breed. But he had the second best performance against the Ohio State team this year. The only one that had a better performance was Fernando Mendoza, and he won the Heisman, and he didn't really even play that well. So, I mean, when you look back at it, yeah, that game wasn't really good. Some of the passes looked a little bit shocking for a guy that we were talking about should be the Heisman winner and potential #1 overall pick. But, I mean, that was a really good defense this year, and to only lose by one possession to a team that only lost one game this year, to the Big Ten champion, to the eventual Heisman winner, and kind of made the Heisman winner not look great in the process. I mean, it's just now you can look back on it and it was like, okay, maybe we were judging him a little bit too harshly there.
Right. And there was a part of the season, I know for sure at the beginning of the year, where there was some talk of, is he hurt? Is he tweaked? Does his arm feel right? And I know that both Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning really tempered that down, but it did seem like towards the end of the year, if you just look at his passing numbers, after the Mississippi State game that you referenced, right after that was 328 yards, and he had 251. He had 389 against Arkansas. I know everybody carves up Arkansas, and then he had nearly 200 against Texas A&M there in the losing effort. You see his season numbers, nearly 3,000 yards overall, 24 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions on the season. Also used his legs for 8 touchdowns there, nearly 250 yards on the ground as well.
For how bad he started off the
Yes.
season. To almost get to 3,000 yards, just be, I believe, 58 yards away from eclipsing the 3,000-yard mark. I mean, that tells you how great of a back half of the season he had.
Right.
Now, I really think for him, the turning point game was that game that you mentioned, the Mississippi State one, just because he absolutely had to have that. Texas was down big, forced to come back, forced overtime, ended up getting the win, 346 yards, 3 touchdowns. But, I mean, in these three games right here, you're talking about 10 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards. So these 3 games really propelled him back into the national spotlight. Almost got Texas into the playoff. I know they missed out on a few spots. The one game they're going to be talking about forever is that Florida game, whether they want to talk about the Ohio State game mattering or not. No, it was the Florida game.
That did it.
If you didn't lose that game, you would have easily been in because of your strength of schedule. But I think now that he's got a full year under his belt, we can actually go into next year with more realistic expectations for Arch. Because Texas is going to host Ohio State next year. That's right. And we'll have to wait and see what Ohio State does in the college football playoff this year.
Yeah, and Ohio State obviously will have Julian Sayin back there as well if he doesn't enter the transfer portal, which I would be shocked if he does. So he would have the rematch of quarterbacks in that game, which I think will be ecstatic, especially if Ohio State were to go on to win this year's national championship as well, which they are one of a handful of teams that will be the favorites in order to do so. I like Arch's demeanor throughout this entire thing, where at the beginning of the season, I think he said all the right things for a young quarterback stepping into that role.
Yes.
And when things weren't going well, I thought he handled that part really well as well, because I think the natural inclination is to be a little frustrated, a little PO'd, so to speak, with just the hype and everything else that goes on. He thought he handled that well. And then when he played well, I thought he handled that well as well, and I think that going into it, he's just going to be a so much more mature quarterback going into next year. And then, watching Julian Sayin go through the season that he went through and kind of under the radar end up being like this Heisman Trophy candidate, I just feel like these two are on a collision course. I'm not saying it's going to be like the college version of Brady and Manning, but like I do feel like these two quarterbacks going into next season could be two of the most talked about, highly prized, and I would say like just the amount of hype going into the season with those two, and they match up there in game 1.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm excited to see it. Just looking back at this season, as you mentioned, Arch going up against Ohio State in the shoe against that Buckeye defense, which I highly doubt that they're just going to reload next year because they're going to lose a ton of guys. They're going to lose Davison Igbinosun, one of their best corners, who I still remember his interception against Penn State last year, which is, if you haven't watched that, go and watch it. It's one of the better ones. It's kind of like the one that, it kind of happened in the NFL this weekend. It was the Jerry Jeudy in the end zone. It was kind of like that, and it was just one of the crazier interceptions that I had seen. And then, obviously, I think Caleb Downs is going to go and get drafted. Cowboys, maybe you should pick them up. That would be nice if you get that draft pick. But when you look...
Attention, Stephen Jones.
Yeah, exactly. Stephen Jones. Get on the walkie-talkie. I saw you were on the walkie-talkie Sunday night, so I don't know what that was all about. But when you look, obviously this season, Sark and company are going to be like, all right, it was a failure. We didn't make the playoff.
Right.
But when you look at next year's schedule, look at all of these home games and look how few away games there are.
Right. I mean, this schedule really, really lines up to have a good season. I know they have to go to College Station there in that matchup. They got the venues that they have to go to are tough venues. I mean, the Tennessee game, I'm sure the LSU game will probably be a night game if both teams are up to snuff there late in the year. The Texas A&M game will be difficult. Of course, you have the Cotton Bowl there. But as you mentioned it, Ohio State at home, Ole Miss is at home, Florida is at home this year, Arkansas is at home this year. Your main two rivals, there are at home. Then you have the neutral site, of course, at the Cotton Bowl. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse because we did it last year.
Yes.
But it does look like, given the way he's played towards the end of the season, and then if he stacks up a good bowl game on top of that against Michigan, this could be the makings of what Texas fans hoped would be a championship run this past season.
And I think it's going to help next season that you don't play Ohio State the first week of the season this week.
Right.
This next year you play them. Yeah, you get the buffer game against Texas State, which is basically your bye game. And then you get to host Ohio State this year as well. So, I mean, all of the cards are in Texas's favor. But as you mentioned, before we start talking about next year, got to talk about this bowl game because there has been a lot of talk about this game for all the wrong reasons.
All the wrong reasons, exactly.
And we still have to play the actual football game. But how will Arch fare, do you think, against this Michigan defense that ranked 14th in FBS this year in points allowed?
I think that this is actually the perfect test to end of the season. It's not an SEC team. It is a great defensive squad, especially there on the back end. And as that graphic says, allowed 2 touchdowns all up the per game in the FBS as far as points allowed. I think that one of the big things about this kind of matchup is not only is it a brand matchup, but it's also a game where it's not like the Arkansas game where you could go in and have confidence because you can light that defense up.
Right.
This is a defense where he'll have to maneuver his way through it. It'll be a scheme defense, a defense they have to scheme against Michigan. But also, like Roger said, I don't know if I fully expect him to play maybe all 4 quarters. How much do they use him?
Yeah.
So do they treat it like a preseason game where he plays maybe first half or whatever and then save him for the rest? Or do you go full throttle? Do you go all out, try to win the game and try to give him some big yards? I don't think he'll have some 350-yard game, nor does he need it. Can he stay efficient? Can he stay mistake-free or as mistake-free as possible? And then go out and try to lead his team to a victory. I just think that being able to have a good game where you feel confident about leading at the end of the season is certainly huge.
I mean, I think you definitely have to see how the game plays out. Obviously, when you look at this game from a distraction standpoint, all of the distractions are on the Michigan sideline right now and in that clubhouse, and who knows what is going on behind the scenes right now. Texas is kind of, licking their chops, so to speak, because there's no talk about them. I mean, the talk was that they missed the playoffs, and they're like, okay, well, we tried.
Right.
We tried to politic our way in. It didn't work. We're just going to go out and win our bowl game, basically. Right. And I wouldn't be shocked if Texas did blow out Michigan just because of all of the distractions. And who knows if Biff Poggi can actually lead a team. I mean, I know he had a little bit of that experience earlier this year, but it was the self-pick suspension from Sharon Moore against a couple of the bottom feeder teams there. So, I mean, you just don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
But I think if Texas were to get out to that big lead, then we might see Matthew Caldwell and, his hard work being the backup, because that's one position. You want to talk about, like, water boys not getting any attention, backup quarterback when you don't play all year, you get no attention, but you're doing a lot of the hard work.
Exactly. And the game that he did come in was that overtime game, and they ended up winning the game late after Arch's really good game. And another reason why I find this interesting quickly here at the very end is the fact that it was actually just before I left. I was in our sports office, and as I was leaving the office, I happened to see a commercial on TV. It was a Viore commercial, and Arch Manning is the main character in the thing. So it's like all these guys now are getting paid like backup quarterbacks in the NFL. So there's really no rush to get yourself there. So if you can season yourself for another 365 days in college, it is well worth it.
His valuation's like $5 million.
Right.
There's no point in. Yeah, I mean, at this point, just treat next season as like the minor leagues and just, continue working on some things you've got to work on. Obviously, the schedule's in your favor to make the CFP.
Yeah.
But you still just got to go put in the work, and if you make the playoff and you get some extra games, that's great. If you win the national championship, that's awesome. But he's just thinking about the NFL at this point, and doing the best thing he can to get him to that next level.
Absolutely. So one day it's Lenora Sellers, the next day it is Arch Manning, 2 powerhouse quarterbacks in this conference, returning to the conference next season. Of course, he's got the Citrus Bowl against Michigan to clean up the 2025 season.